Dear Jacquie, I'm very happy to have you again. In the meantime, we witnessed ethnic cleansing and genocide in Gaza, ethnic cleansing and a lesser form of genocide in the West Bank, and actually the negative impact of re-election of Netanyahu's government and Netanyahu's cabinet, which is filled with Kahanists, was felt before the escalation in Gaza. What happened in October was a continuation between Islamists and Messianic Zionists, but the problem exists for decades, for maybe 120 years. How the current instability and current aggression on Gaza affects the life in New York. What's the impact of Middle Eastern crisis on academia? Because we saw that many anti-Zionist Jewish groups in the States were protesting against the current escalation. So whoever says that anti-Semitism equals anti-Zionism is misleading people. Anti-Semitism has nothing to do with anti-Zionism. So please, go ahead. Give us your
Everybody in New York is depressed. People are very depressed about it in New York. What's interesting is I talk to a lot of people about this. And I have a big Zionist boss who forbade me from wearing a keffiyeh. She saw I had a keffiyeh on one day when I came into work. It was right after October 7th and the week after. And she said I was not allowed to wear that in the building. And I said, why? She said, because it upsets people. I said, not everybody. And then I argued with her because you know how I am. I don't give in to authority. And I said, so she agreed to let me wear my red and white keffiyeh, but I can't wear my black and white one. Because the black and white one in movies, they're all terrorists. But the red and white ones are worn by the Saudis, so they're okay. This is the level of
no, but this is stupid.
Of ignorance.
This is really stupid.
This
because
of course it's stupid. But this is the way people are. So, but what I find interesting is, you know,
Abu
I take
Abu Baida wears red and white keffiyeh.
Yeah, so every day I take car service to and from work, or I go out to Brooklyn to see my family or whatever. I talk to all the drivers. All of them are against Israel and what's going on. Everybody is pro-Palestinian. And even in my building, I talk to people in the elevators, and they're all pro-Palestinian. But on my door, I had a poster of Rachel Corrie, you know, who was killed by the Israeli bulldozers, so like over 10 years ago. She was a volunteer and an American. And there's a big foundation set up for her. And I have a big poster of her on my door. She's exact same age as my daughter, and she looks just like her. I also have a sign up saying, you know, Israel, make peace, you know, blah, blah, blah. So I have a bunch of signs, and somebody in my building comes and slashes them with a knife all the time. They're slowly slashing all the signs on my door. So despite the fact that most of the people I talk to in this building are pro-Palestinian and against Israel, you have your fanatics who are, you know, slashing my signs with a knife, who are out screaming at people at protests. I was at a big protest against AIPAC last week, and we went to the offices of AIPAC. You know, AIPAC buys all the American politicians are bought by AIPAC. And what was great is they had these huge signs showing that Chuck Schumer was given $850-something thousand by AIPAC senator. Christine Gillibrand, our other New York senator, was giving like $5,000-something. And Hakeem Jeffries, the black guy who's now the Senate, the House majority leader, who everybody thinks is a saint, is a big pro-Israel guy, because he gets like around $400,000 from AIPAC in 1 year. So, but there's been a huge development, Stephen, just yesterday. I don't know if you saw it. There's been constant protests at Chuck Schumer's house, at his office, at his house in Brooklyn. Protest groups have been driving him crazy. And yesterday, he came out with a statement that stunned everybody. He came out saying that Israel needs to have new elections and they have to have a new government. And this shocked the hell out of everybody. So it seems now that, and I have family, some of my Jewish family are all big pro-Israel.
Of course.
So I'm curious to see now if this is going to start turning. But to be honest, I had a big talk with a driver last night, and both of us agreed we couldn't understand how people are allowing this to happen. And a lot of us in New York are very depressed, but we're afraid to open our mouths. So if I put signs up in my building, I have a huge building, with 11 floors. And so I make like 22 signs to put around the building. They're torn down immediately. Because the problem is that I think the majority of people are against what Israel's doing. But there's a minority of lunatics who are very scary. I'm sure that's why I don't have my NYIT teaching job this year. I'm sure I'm on the Canary Project out of Israel. They blacklist academics and students who are pro-Palestinian. And I'm sure I'm on their list, and that's why I didn't get my academic teaching jobs. So people are afraid to open their mouths. I've never seen anything like this where everybody is for Palestine and against Israel, and everybody is afraid to open their mouth. It's really bizarre. It's very scary.
They started to punish academics. I wanted to have a conversation with a couple of American professors of contemporary Middle Eastern politics, and they're specialized in history of Palestine and history of Arab-Israeli wars, but they're afraid to talk because of sanctions that they may face by their pro-Zionist colleagues and pro-Zionist groups at the university. This is very bad, and at the same time, I'm making my list of academics who are pro-Israeli and who support what IDF is doing for decades. So I'm blacklisting them, and those academics are not going to be featured in the Jordan Times, nor I'm going to give them any opportunity to talk, because whoever is intellectually honest and balanced will accuse both Islamist terrorism. They'll condemn Hamas actions, actions of Islamic Jihad, terrorist actions of secular Palestinian groups in the past who committed acts of terror. But at the same time, they're going to acknowledge that Israel was established by East European settler communities, by colonial settlers from the States and from Eastern Europe, which is the same. They all moved from the Pale settlement to New York, and from New York here. And whoever doesn't acknowledge that is either a lobbyist or just stupid. You don't have much room and much sympathy for them. And unfortunately, some academics, including ASOR, blatantly supported Israel after October 7th without mentioning even what was going on in the West Bank for more than a year. I'm talking about just the most recent escalation of violence. I'm not talking about the decades of apartheid, decades of problems. And you witnessed that. That's amazing. By yourself when you went to Israel during such campaigns, and in 2014, you witnessed what was going on when for 3 months they were pounding Gaza and imposing all
Right.
kinds of blockade.
I tried to go to Gaza with the group of the soldiers breaking the silence.
Yeah.
We got to Sderot, but then they started bombing again. We went during a ceasefire, but they started bombing again. I really feel sorry for the Israelis who are against this. And I know there are many, but
There
they're
are many,
afraid
of
to
course.
open their mouths too. They're also afraid to open their mouths. And so I'm curious. I haven't read Haaretz yet today to see what they say about Schumer's comments, but Haaretz has been warning that, Netanyahu's turning Israel into a pariah state, which is the comment that Schumer made,
Yeah.
that Israel's becoming a pariah state. So I'm curious to see what effect this is going to have in Israel. Probably we won't see much until next week. Tomorrow's Saturday, so it's the Sabbath. So, it's going to percolate for a couple of days, but I wonder what's going to happen in Israel. But there's so many Israelis who are so crazy, the people blocking the aid trucks, and children, 9, 10-year-old children are dying of starvation. It's totally heartbreaking to me. And I just don't understand how the world lets this go on. And the UN has to change that veto system. I think the consequences of this is that the Palestinians will not have died in vain. And this is my only comfort, that 30,000 of them died, but now the world knows the truth about Palestine. People have been reading about the history of the formation of Israel, reading about the truth of the condition of the Palestinians and what life was like in Gaza, etc. So I think this is very good because many people didn't really know much about the whole situation and they were always pro-Israel. Now that's changed radically. So that's their lives. They didn't die in vain, number one. Number two, they're going to make significant changes to international organizations like the UN, the World Court, International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court. All of these institutions are going to have to be changed because of this situation. And it's just heartbreaking. And I feel that I was very lucky, Stefan. I exhibited, that painting. I think you wrote a review about it. That painting of Gaza that I did, the Angel of Gaza.
That was in
made a
2017.
print, right? And I made a print of that painting, a large print of that painting, like 3 by 5 feet, and I exhibited in the Westmouth Gallery in their winter show. And I was scared that they weren't going to let me put the painting up. But the gallery director is French, very, very nice, and I think she was pro-Palestine, so nobody said boo about it. And we have many Jews in the building, many Israelis who live in the building. And what was interesting is I got only favorable comments from people. And actually, an Israeli artist who lives down my hall came up to me personally when I was gallery sitting and thanked me for making the painting and putting the painting in the show. He was Israeli. So
many of Ashkenaz who make 95% of Jewry in the States are opposing what's going on. They oppose the unilateral decisions by different Israeli governments. And we shouldn't forget this. We shouldn't think that it's the same camp. We have diversity of ideologies, diversity of political views, and we should value them individually and according to their deeds or misdeeds. The problem is that yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, the problem is that a minority of them have control of institutions, particularly the wealthier ones. And a lot of the galleries have not allowed art about Gaza in it or art critical of Israel in it in America, because of the art world is controlled by many Jews, and the galleries in New York are almost all exclusively controlled by Jews, and they're Jews who are part of the 1%, or they've got the collectors who are these, enormously wealthy people. So that the problem is, it's like the young Jews and students, Jews from like normal economic backgrounds, middle class Jews, are all against Israel and for Palestine. But the wealthy Jews who control the institutions, they control the media, CNN, New York Times. I mean, all these media things are controlled by the wealthy, and they're afraid of the things like the New York Times and stuff. They're afraid of AIPAC also. I mean, there was somebody was telling me yesterday about all the crazy comments in the New York Times in response to Schumer's comment yesterday. And I've lost close friends. Some of my closest, dearest friends, I can't talk to them anymore. They're refuse to criticize Israel. No matter what Israel does, they can't criticize Israel. And that's, to me, like a pathology, a mental disease. They have no objectivity. So I'm hoping that what Schumer did makes some kind of impact. But it's people are very depressed about it, and people feel overwhelmed. We feel helpless. I mean, I've gone to many protests. There's protests tomorrow. There's protests today. There's a protest at the UN, I think, tonight. A vigil of the Fellowship of Reconciliation. The people, Quakers, peace groups. Everybody's out, and nothing seems to be changing. But they're harassing politicians like Schumer, and I think that's kind of paid off. I think he just wanted it because they're going to their houses and their offices every day with protests, and I think that harassment has paid off.
I think that a coalition of Arab American voters have successfully organized protest effort during the Democratic primary process. And this is a sign of growing restlessness in the Democratic base about the situation in Gaza and general situation in the Middle East. So cracks began to publicly emerge between the Israeli government and the current US government, plus because of the US unconditional support and Biden's unconditional support to Netanyahu's cabinet, the voters of Democratic Party are not going to support Biden and Democratic Party.
Well, in Michigan,
unfortunately, both camps, Trump's camp and Biden's camp, unconditionally support Israel.
The Arab Americans in Michigan led the campaign to vote uncommitted on the primary. So, and that's what I plan to do in the New York primary, is vote uncommitted. And this is what scared Biden. Now, Biden is the largest recipient of PAC money out of all the politicians. So, he's been bought and sold. And Kamala Harris is married to a big Zionist who has ties to settlements. But she made a speech 2 weeks ago, critical of the genocide and stuff. So, but meanwhile, people are dying. Okay, we can say this is going to happen, that's going to happen. But what gets me every morning when I wake up, that's the first thing I think about. I turn on Al Jazeera to see how many people have died. The first couple of weeks after October 7th, I didn't sleep at all. I had Al Jazeera on 24/7. It's the only news that I trust. Plus, Amy Goodman in New York is in
You're
America,
talking about
the
democracy
other
now.
reliable news outlet on it. Democracy that I get lots of information from is the Electronic Intifada. And the Electronic Intifada has been doing a lot of investigative research on an issue that pisses me off, excuse my language, and infuriates me, which is sexual violence issue. When October 7th came and they all said Hamas had a policy of rape, that Hamas had ordered all of its fighters to rape Israeli women, I thought, Hamas is a fundamentalist Islamic organization. I know about a little bit about Islam, and I went up and I did more research about rape. Rape is forbidden, prohibited. Punishment can be execution. Fundamentalist Islamicists would not order their fighters to rape because this is against Islam. And I wrote articles about it and talked about my Zoom Palestine thing. And now what's turned out, the Electronic Intifada has done research on these so-called rapes from October 7th. They've discovered, and the New York Times actually admitted this, that they screwed up in an article. They made a small apology, that there was no forensic evidence or scientific evidence of rape of the women on October 7th. And none of the so-called rape centers and hospitals in Israel reported any rape victims on October 7th. And the woman they said who was raped and killed, who was their main person they talked about, I forget her name, her family said they did autopsy, she was not raped. And they're furious at the New York Times and the media for, and the Israeli media has it all over, for saying that she was raped and murdered, because she was not raped. And this is embarrassing for her family. She's got children who survived to think that their mother was raped, and she wasn't raped. So this is something that upsets me greatly. And as they always use the sex card, the sexual violence against Israeli women. They, whenever Israel does something horrible, like the Flower Massacre, when they shot people who were, standing in line for food 2 weeks ago, the same day they talked about sexual violence against women. That was the big headline, and the massacre.
Or they're talking about Holocaust, and they're promoting films about Holocaust during Oscars award.
Yeah.
Like the World War II was the only conflict that happened in the history, not that 100 years passed since the end of the World War II, which doesn't mean that we have to believe in fairy tales of some revisionists who are trying to minimize suffering of people in Europe or people around the world during Nazi dictatorship and Nazi expansion. On the contrary, it has to be emphasized, but it's not going to be a trump card for Zionists to claim that Hamas and Islamic Jihad are some kind of Islamofascist, or that Iranian theocracy is an Islamofascist regime and other nonsense. If we look back into the history, we can draw more parallels between Beitar and Jabotinsky with Nazis and fascists than other way around. Muslim Brotherhood doesn't have the same ideology as Nazis, while far-right Zionism is very similar to other European totalitarian and extreme jingoistic models. Jingoism comes from Zionist side, is very similar to jingoism that exists in Europe. It's a European ideology. It's not the ideology from the Middle East or from Yemen. We know very well who brought Zionism not only into the Middle East, but into who brought Zionism on the stage. So, of course, you have lots of people who are either your relatives or your friends, and they come from Ashkenaz background. I'm sure that many of them are against the escalation in Gaza. Many of them condemn IDF and atrocities that they're doing deliberately, because when they bomb people who are waiting water or food, it's not a military target.
Unbelievable.
It's not a military target. If they deliberately shoot protesters and civilians with a sniper, like in 2018, they're not a military target, and they're doing this on purpose. What do you think?
Well, the IDF
yes, please go ahead.
The IDF kids, the soldiers, have been trained in schools that have horrific propaganda against Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims. They are demonized. So they are, they do this stuff because they don't feel they're human. They, like Palestinians are the devil, or they're subhuman, and the ideas of greater Israel, just get rid of all the Palestinians and let Israel take over. That's what they want. They want Gaza. Actually, they had a big protest. Let me tell you one successful thing.
Yeah,
They
please.
had a plan in Long Island this for today or tomorrow to have a sale of real estate of Gaza and got real estate in the illegal settlements in the West Bank, of selling plots of land to people. And there was huge, so many protests against it. People, have money, and a lot of Jews live out there, and they all, wanted us in the West Bank because there were too many protests.
Yeah.
So the protests are taking toll on Israel's agenda, and people are also exhausted. People are you get tired from doing this all day after day. It's exhausting, but people are not giving up, especially young kids, young people. They're out all the time. They're not giving up. They're not giving up. I have some friends in Gaza. I know an artist there, Khalid Tabasha, and I'm in touch with him, and they're all starving. I mean, it's just I'm in touch with, and I met the Gaza Dance Company in Cairo in 2011 at the festival for the Arab Spring that they had that Hilda Hiadi took me to, and I exhibited a print of a painting, and I met the Gaza Dance Group Company. They were lovely young women, dancers. They did a great, beautiful performance, and they loved my painting. So I gave it to them, and they took it back to Gaza to put in their dance studio. And now it's probably bombed, but I have connections to Gaza. I never got there because it was always difficult to travel there. And but I feel my the dead people are lucky they got out of it, but the survivors between being starved and tormented and abused, particularly the young kids who get arrested and brought to Israel and tortured. Mossab Abu Taha, who he is, the big writer. He was on my Zoom Palestine program last year from his English bookstore in Gaza City. And he's in Cairo now. He got out safely, but he had some close calls. He was arrested, taken to Israel, tortured, and because he's so famous, he had written in the New Yorker. His book of poetry is on a bestseller list. He was a visiting professor at Harvard. There was an international uproar when people found out that he was in Israel prison being tortured, that they freed him, and he managed to get out to Cairo. But he has family in Gaza, and so I'm always in touch with him and hearing what's going on. What is going to be the condition? Okay, we're going to end the war eventually. What are the survivors' lives going to be like? First of all, the children have been deeply traumatized. They are never going to be normal children. They were starved, so their brains didn't develop enough. Their bodies are going to be stunted. They're going to have deep psychological trauma. What are the consequences for these children and the adults who survived, who lost everything and everybody? What are they going to be like? That this is what worries me, is the situation for the Palestinians after the war, when everybody's going to give up thinking about them. say, oh, the war's over, everything's wonderful, this is not going to be wonderful. And you're going to produce a new generation of terrorists. These kids
Of
who
course.
survive are going to grow
Of
up
course.
and they're going to want revenge.
Of course. We're going to have a new generation of terrorists.
And they're all going to be, they're going to be psychopaths because they have been so traumatized. They've had such horrible experiences. And they'll never be like normal people with any kind of normal sense of compassion or empathy or anything. The damage on children of trauma and children of war. And Stefan, in Europe, the generation after World War II had many, many problems, many, many problems. They still have them, It's the Holocaust survivors' families have them. So this is going to go away. This is going to be, onward. And I just hope the Arab countries like Saudi Arabia and stuff who have money actually step up to their responsibilities to the Palestinians, although they never have before. So I'm not holding my breath, but they're going to need a lot of help, a lot of help. So I'm going this summer, by the way. I'm coming the end of April, inshallah, if I can get money together to go. And then I'm going to, work at the refugee center, the Jesuit center, teaching English there. But then and most of those refugees, many of them are Sudanese. And, the situation in Sudan is also horrible right now. But then I'm going to go to Hebron and work with those kids. Remember, I did art projects in Hebron. Yeah. And I just got messages. They're all waiting for me to come. And, people say, isn't it dangerous to go to Hebron? I said, yes, but
it is dangerous in Hebron, of course.
But I don't care, I've lived a long life. So if they shoot me, shoot me. When I go to the West Bank, I've been tear gassed. I've had skunk water thrown at me. I've had guns pointed at me, and they haven't managed to kill me yet, so maybe this time they will, but I'm not staying back. Those kids need to know people care, and they want to shoot me, fine, but I'm going. I'm going because I want to do art with those kids. We had so much fun. It's so freaking awful in Hebron now. The whole West Bank is horrible. And, these children are living in trauma all the time and they need, some respite. So we started a mural on the wall at the Center of Hope. My friend Ayman Al-Fakari, who's just a terrific guy, runs the center, young guy. His father lives in his room because he was tortured in Israeli prison for years, doesn't go out. His brother, the same thing, 19-year-old brother. He supports the whole family with his House of Hope. And he has expats come in and teach from all over the world and help run programs. And, they protect the children in Hebron so they can go to school without getting run over by Israeli settlers. I mean, the situation there is...
Most of Israeli settlers came from New York.
That's right.
I'm talking about Hebronite Messianic Zionists who live in the downtown, which they occupied, or they live in Kiryat Arba and other settlements. I mean, they all came from Brooklyn.
Yeah. And this is why the New York politicians are so afraid to criticize Israel, because New York has the largest Jewish population outside Israel, just New York City.
True.
So the Jews push, and they vote as a group. The rabbi tells them who to vote for, and they all vote for whoever the rabbi says. And they're totally controlled, total mind control in these Orthodox communities. I know my ex-husband is one of them, and he's like a vegetable, like an eggplant, no thinking for himself, no critical thinking. But, he's not well mentally. So that's, why he doesn't function. But these Jewish communities, they vote as a block. The Orthodox rabbi tells them who to vote for, and that's who they vote for. So politicians are scared of the Jewish vote in New York. If they don't have it, they'll never get elected. But there's a lot.
what do you think? Is this rift between Schumer and Mileikovsky or Netanyahu? We can use his more popular name, although he's Mileikovsky by his origin. Is this a shift? Is it a split between Democratic
Absolutely.
Party and Likud? Because even when Blinken
Absolutely.
came a
I
couple
think
of
that's
times,
a big
he
deal.
was
This is a
critical.
big deal.
Yeah.
No, this is a big deal. That's why I'm curious to see what Haaretz is going to say about it. Right now, they've just reported what happened, but I want to see over the next couple of days in the Israeli press how they're going to deal with it. Now, my experience when I was in Israel, I realized that a lot of the Israelis really hate Americans, and they have I've been told to my face, we don't care what you Americans think. We're going to do what we want, and Americans should butt out of our business. So the far right, who's running Israel right now, that's their opinion, is that they have contempt for Americans. And also, remember, most of the American Jews they don't approve of because they're Reform Jews or conservative Jews. Jews are only Jews if they're, according to the far right in Israel and the government, if they're the right kind of Jew. If you're not the right kind of Jew, you're not a Jew. So these Jews in Israel, they hate the American Jews because
I think it's not a matter. It's not a matter about their geographical location, but what they support.
Because they feel that we butt into their business, we try to tell them what to do, and that we should shut up and butt
Like a
out.
bigger
And
brother.
I've been told that when I went to Israel many times, and they don't even like to speak English. So I went to a train station, and there was a Russian Jew there, and she refused to speak English to me. She would only speak Hebrew, Russian.
Yeah. Anyways, we can hope that the situation is going to improve.
I'm sure she knew English, but
Now the session is going to stop.
Ramadan Mubarak.
Yeah,
Ramadan
Ramadan Mubarak, and we'll talk.
And
we'll talk.
Yeah. So thanks.